Hare Krishna, welcome back to our Bhakti Yoga Journey series. So, continuing with our themes from the Bhagavad Puran. So, today we have a very special, very deep chapter. This is from the first canto, ninth chapter. So, picking up from where we left off last time, if you remember in our last discussion, we discussed how Kunti Devi, she offered these very, very beautiful, very deep, profound prayers to Lord Krishna, requesting him to stay back in Hastinapura for some more time. And of course, there are so many things that we went through that whole series of prayers about how the mood of praying that involves, glorifying the Lord, expressing your gratitude to the Lord, and ultimately making an appeal for the Lord's grace. So we saw these three aspects. And after that whole episode was over, the focus now shifts to King Yudhishthira. Because King Yudhishthira, he was feeling very, very despondent. Something very similar to what happened to Arjuna before the battle of Kurukshetra. Exactly same situation happens to Yudhishthir after the war. Because Arjuna, if you remember, in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he was feeling very guilty for potentially having to kill all his family members. And Yudhishthir, after the war, he was literally feeling so bad about the whole war and how just to become the king, he had to lead to so much of destruction of life. And so as Yudhishthir was very, very despondent, he approaches Krishna. And now technically, Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, and it worked for Arjuna. So technically, Krishna could have said, okay, don't worry, I'm going to repeat all the 18 chapters for you, right? And now we don't have the urgency of the war. Maybe I'll throw in extra couple of bonus chapters for you also, right? But Krishna didn't do that. It's very interesting if you see that many times we read only the Bhagavad Gita and we try to understand Krishna just from the perspective of the Gita. But if you really want to know Krishna's greatness, you have to go through the Mahabharata. Because throughout the Mahabharata, Krishna is always playing this role of a invisible leader in the background. He is a Sutradhari. He is the one who is orchestrating every event that is happening in the Mahabharata. But still, he remains as this very invisible person in the background, making his presence felt only when needed. And in this situation also, Yudhishthir was in a dilemma and in a state of lamentation. Krishna instead decides to do something different. He decides to take Yudhishthira and all the Pandavas to Bhishma, who fell on the battlefield and is still waiting for the right time of death. So technically, though the war is over, Bhishma didn't die, right? We'll talk more about him a little later, right? And just to understand the significance of this, because if you see, the Bhagavad Gita is 18 chapters in the Mahabharata, around 700 verses, 18 chapters. If you see, the Bhagavad Gita is part of the bigger book Mahabharata, and Mahabharata also has different chapters called as Parvas. And Gita, the chapter where Gita is spoken, is not called Gita Parva, but it is referred to as Bhishma Parva. So the chapter where Krishna himself is speaking, the Bhagavad Gita, the most profound book ever, is not named after Krishna, it is named after Bhishma. Just to understand the context, how great a personality Bhishma is, and we're going to understand his glories now in today's chapter. More, while Krishna and Arjuna had a conversation of just 700 verses, 18 chapters, the conversation that Bhishma and Yudhishthira are going to have now is going to last around 550 chapters of the Mahabharata, spreading over 22,700 verses. Right? So if you see, Krishna spoke just 700 verses and we glorify him. But Krishna's devotee, a great Mahajan named Bhishma, when he speaks, look at the real estate he gets in the book. He gets 22,700 verses. So much details are covered. right? And his it's spread over two chapters, the Shanti Parva and Anushasana Parva, over two chapters of Mahabharata. And if you understand the broader context, Mahabharata has around 100,000 verses, 1 lakh verses. So nearly 25% of the book is spoken by one person, Bhishma. So if Mahabharata is a book of dharma and 25% of that book is spoken by one person, so please understand who is this great personality Bhishma about whom we are going to hear, we are going to study, right? So many times when we read just that, if there's one or two mention of Bhishma in the entire Bhagavad Gita, or even if you read this particular chapter of the Bhagavad Puran, we may think, okay, Bhishma is some great soul, but we may not estimate his real greatness, because the the inner substance of a person comes at the time of greatest calamity. And in this chapter, Bhishma is going to go through the greatest calamity of his life, which is the phenomena of death. And what his consciousness is going to be at the time of death is going to amaze you. I mean, there is no other personality you will ever hear in the broad Vedic context or in any context who has shown this high level of devotional consciousness at the time of death, right? So just to understand, I'm going to give you all a small exercise, right? If you have a pen and paper, it's even more handy. Otherwise, grab your phone, because you have to type few things now, right? Writing even better. So take a moment and think about your most favorite person in this world. Think about your most favorite, and you don't have to think much. If they're really your most favorite, their name must be in the top of your head. And don't talk about Batman, Superman, right? Or don't even talk about Krishna. Think about a person whom you interacted with, perhaps your parent or your best friend, your teacher, your, I don't know, your high school friend, whomever you feel is that one favorite person with whom you have had personal time with him or her. Think about that person, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds to write as many good qualities about that person that you can. And your time starts now. 30 seconds to write about your most favorite person in this world. Fifteen seconds over. Seven, six, five, four, three, two, one. Stop. So in the chat box, open in the Zoom chat box and try to put in how many qualities, the number of qualities that you managed to gather. Put a number. Okay. Apurva says 6. Okay. Tina ji says 8. Shruti ji is saying 4. I could see she was thinking about that person. What should I write about this person? Right. Yeah. Sadhana is saying 8. Nice. Anybody else wants to add? Okay. Now you don't have to do this, but imagine. Try doing the same exercise while doing a headstand. Or doing it in a state where you're in a lot of physical discomfort. Right? Now imagine your body pierced through so many arrows going through and through your body that there is not enough place to insert a finger between two arrows. And you're lying there just waiting to die. And in that state of excruciating pain, I ask you to do the same exercise. Right? You will all start hurling abuses at me saying, get lost, Prabhuji. Why the hell did you come here? Right? Don't you see I'm suffering? But when Bhishma was put in the same situation, he came up with not, let me see the numbers again, not three, not eight, not four, not six. He came up with 1,000 qualities, which is today known as a Vishnu Sahasranam, right? So that shows the level of spiritual absorption Bhishma had on Lord Krishna. Because when you have to talk about the object of your love, it is not an intellectual exercise. It doesn't come from your head, it has to come from your heart. And that is the glory of Bhishma. So, Krishna instructs the Pandavas, please wear your best royal clothes, your best royal jewelry, and in the best decorated chariots, let's go to the battlefield and watch and meet this old man who's about to die. You may be wondering, when a person is on the deathbed, usually, sometimes when our family members, when they're in a critical stage of their life, we go there with a sober mood, right? You don't go wearing your fancy designer clothes and your Prada bag and, all your designer shoes. You're not going to go there with that outfit to the hospital, right? But why did Krishna ask him to do that? Because Krishna, you will see in this chapter, as much as a devotee is eager to glorify the Lord is equally keen on glorifying his devotee. And as soon as the Pandavas reach there in the battlefield where Bhishma is just lying there all alone, surrounded by so many dead bodies, it's not a very comfortable space to be in, right? And yet, when he went there, as soon as he saw the Pandavas, he became so happy. He started beaming. A beaming smile came on his face because he realized, because Krishna wanted to make Bhishma very, very happy. Because throughout the Pandavas' life, Bhishma was a silent witness of all the suffering that they had to go through. And finally, Krishna wanted to give that moment of redemption to Bhishma, that look, your desire has come true. Look, the Pandavas are now the royal emperors, right? So as soon as he saw the Pandavas, it is said that Bhishma, his eyes became moistened with tears of affection. And immediately he became overwhelmed with all the love and started speaking to the Pandavas. And very, very powerful verse. I'd like to project this verse on our screen. Yeah. So he says, look, aho kashtam aho anyayam yadyuyam dharmanandana jivitum na ahritum klishtam vipra dharma achyuta ashraya. Oh, what terrible suffering and what terrible injustices you good souls suffer for being the sons of religion personified. You did not deserve to remain alive under those tribulations, yet you were protected by Vipra, Dharma, and Achyuta. By the Brahmanas, Vipra, Dharma, religiosity, and Achyuta, by the Supreme Lord. Can you imagine? Here's a person who's about to die. He is empathizing at the suffering of somebody else. Not that they are still suffering. For suffering that happened in the past, now it's like, and they live happily ever after stage. But now, Bhishma, he could be craving for others' sympathy. Right? A small thing happens to us and we immediately want the whole world to sympathize with us. Rather, Bhishma is empathizing with the suffering of the Pandavas, saying what great suffering you all had to go through. This shows the glory of Bhishma, where even in the moment of his greatest pain, he is willing to shed tears for others' suffering. That is a hallmark of a Mahajan who have such infinite bandwidth of love within their heart that they can genuinely cry for others, not the crocodile tears that sometimes people offer, but genuine tears. And then he says, and he extends, oh, not just you Pandavas, my dear daughter-in-law Kunti, whose heartfelt prayers we heard in the previous chapter, right? One, she became a widow at a very, very young age. Second, she single-handedly had to raise her children. But then once the children grew up, because of the enmity among the cousins, they had to be banished. So mother again also had to leave the palace. And later on, so many calamities happened in the life of the Pandavas, and Kunti had to suffer because of the different actions of the Pandavas. So he starts empathizing even with Kunti. And then, now at this point, this is a very powerful verse coming up next, just to build a little context to that. So many times when we suffer, when we go through misery in life, the conditioned mind wants to know the cause of suffering. And this is such a, what should I say, a trivial phenomena, because when bad things happen to us, when we have the right emotional framework, we learn to just accept the way of providence and move on with our life. So when we are emotionally very strong, emotionally grounded, then naturally we get the ability to handle the trials and tribulations of life. But the problem with many of us is, because we are not emotionally grounded, our EQ is very low. We try to compensate our EQ with our IQ, and we enter in the realm of overthinking. Why did this happen to me? Could I have done something else to avoid this problem? Maybe it happened because of that other person. The blame game starts, right? And the blame game will end with whom? Krishna, you are the cause of all my problems. Why? Because you are Sarva Karana Karanam. You are the cause of all causes. The real reason why I'm suffering is because of you, right? But now, very powerful, instruction Bhishma is giving to provide solace to the suffering Pandavas. Because you remember, Yudhishthir came here with a mood of lamentation, thinking he is responsible for all the deaths. But Bhishma is going to give a powerful clarification. He says, in my opinion, sarvam kala kritam manye. It's all happening due to the inevitable time factor, under whose control everyone in every planet is carried, just like how clouds are carried by the wind. Vayor iva ganavali. So if you see, sometimes when the wind blows, everything that is there in the sky, clouds, they just have to move. The clouds, they have no control over the movement of wind. So likewise, we are all the living entities in this world, we are like those clouds in the infinite space of sky. And time is that invisible force which is governing our lives. And sometimes when not so nice situations happen, rather than trying to blame a person or a situation or sometimes even ourselves, it is best to understand that there are certain forces beyond me. Right? Now, at one level, we try to analyze and see, have I made any genuine mistake in this situation? What is it that I can do to improve my situation? But most times in life, calamities just happen beyond our control, right? Even though you have done everything right, bad things happen. So that is the time we need to understand that we are not in control. There are factors beyond us that are controlling our lives. So rather than breaking our head over what I should have done, which you can never change the past, it is good to find that solace in this philosophy, that how ultimately providence is in control. The time factor, destiny is in control, right? It is not, surrender to destiny does not mean giving up your action. Surrendering to destiny means giving up your overthinking after your actions, right? So this is the point which Bhishma is trying to convey, that it's all happening due to inevitable time. But somebody may question, but look on the side of Pandavas, who all are there? the greatest warrior Arjuna, the strongest person Bhima, Dharma personified Yudhishthir, and forget all of them. Krishna himself was on the side of Pandavas, yet what happened? Right? Oh, wonderful. How was the influence of this inevitable time? See how reversals can happen in the presence of King Yudhishthir, who is Dharma personified. Bhima, who the greatest fighter with the club, the greatest bowman, Arjuna, right? And above all, Lord Krishna is the best well-wisher of the Pandavas, and still they have to go through suffering, right? So sometimes when calamities happen in our life, it shakes our spiritual faith. In the life of a devotee, in the life of a spiritual seeker, calamities come not as a karmic reaction, but as a spiritual instruction, allowing us to grow internally, right? And this is a very, very important mindset that we need to have, because if you look at the history of the world also, many great thinkers became atheists because they could not process this one simple philosophy that is being conveyed here. Why am I, a righteous person, going through suffering? When the very, very famous scientist Charles Darwin, we all know him for this theory of evolution, and we know how this evolution theory has become the foundation for many atheistic philosophies and tendencies, mindsets. But actually, Charles Darwin was a very, very devout Christian, an atheistic person. And somehow, at a very, very young age, his daughter died. And when his innocent daughter died, he started questioning, really, does there a God who exists? Because how can an innocent, pure child who never committed any sin go through such major calamity? So that's when he denounced God, he denounced theism, he denounced his religious practices, and started thinking, so if God is not in control, then who is in control? Right? So the thinker that he was, right, he started probing, maybe there are some other laws of nature which are in control. And that's what motivated him. So that atheistic worldview motivated him to come up with this philosophy of the theory of evolution and the origin of species, right? So the point here is that how, when calamities happen in our lives, it's very, very natural to develop that kind of an atheistic mentality. So Bhishma here is trying to, give solace to Yudhishthir, saying that, look, sometimes practicing spiritualists will also go through difficulties. When Krishna says, I will protect my devotees, he doesn't say, I'm going to make everybody a millionaire and everybody's life is going to be comfortable. Right? Rather, when Krishna says, I protect my devotees, Krishna is promising, I'm going to protect their consciousness. Because ultimately, the only wealth we have in this world is our consciousness. And Krishna is going to protect that. And sometimes to protect our consciousness, we may have to go through some difficulties, right? And sometimes life may be also peaceful. So a devotee is not focused on peace or misery, but rather they are focusing on growth, their spiritual growth, the evolution of their consciousness, right? If peace can help me evolve, I embrace peace. If misery can help me evolve, I embrace misery, right? So when the purpose becomes very, very clear that, oh, if spiritual growth is my ultimate aim, then such bewilderment will not happen. So here is clarifying that do not think this is all a karmic reaction. Yudhishthir, the suffering is not because you were responsible for the killing of so many kings. Rather, he says, O king, no one can know the plan of the Lord. Because somebody say, oh, Krishna is right with us. Why don't we just go and ask Krishna? Krishna, why all this happened? What is your plan? He says, no, nobody can understand the plan of the Lord. Right? Even great philosophers inquire exhaustively, but they are bewildered. So this is the So this is a very beautiful philosophy that comes in the Bhagavatam, that how the absolute truth has two, uh, you could say, two levels of understanding. One, the personal loving God as Sri Krishna, and that same absolute truth, Krishna, is also manifested as this very neutral, imperceptible time factor. So when calamities happen in a person's life, a devotee is not blaming the immediate causes, not even blaming the Lord, but just says this is time factor. So they blame the absolute truth as a time factor, but they seek solace again in the absolute truth as the personal God Krishna. Right? So this is the beautiful Achintya Beda Bhed, the inconceivable oneness and difference. The cause of my suffering is Krishna as time, but the cause of my solace is Krishna as Bhagavan, the loving Bhaktavatsal. Right? Because Krishna puts devotees through difficulties to allow them to come out of their comfort zones and evolve to the next stage of their spiritual life. In fact, no great devotee became great without going through this trial of fire in their life. So now at this point, some of you may be thinking, oh, I didn't have any major calamities in my life. So add yourself a little, append that statement with yet. I didn't have any major calamities yet. But it's not to scare all of you, but at the same time, we need to understand when Krishna puts us through these testing situations, he also empowers us to face the test. Because Krishna is never going to test us beyond our capacity. The level of test that Prabhupada had to go through, he knows if we were put in that situations, we are going to pack our Bhagavatam and send it to the neighbor's house. Right? But rather, Krishna is going to test us, but to our capacity. Right? And then he says, oh, Yudhishthir, I maintain therefore all this is in the plan of the Lord. Accepting the inconceivable plan of the Lord, you must follow it. You are now appointed as the administrative head. So you should take care of those subjects who are now rendered helpless. So the bigger plan of the Lord is to establish dharma. And for the sake of establishing dharma, if you Pandavas were used as a pawn, as an instrument, become a sincere instrument in the hands of the Lord. So do not think that, you killed, you were responsible for the killing, you are going to accumulate some karma for it. This is not the right way of thinking, but rather understand that Krishna had the bigger plan and you were used as an instrument in executing the plan of the Lord. Right? Therefore, and that Sri Krishna who's standing with us, he is none other than the inconceivable original supreme personality of Godhead. Right? He's straight away pointing out to Krishna. That Krishna is right there in front of us. So Prabhupada gives a very beautiful purport explaining how, because Bhishma is that Mahajan, the great soul. So what makes Bhishma a great Mahajan, right, is very, very interesting. So Bhishma is one of the Ashta Vasus. The Vasus are these very, very special personalities who are involved in the creation and maintenance of this world. And due to certain reasons, they got cursed and they were born as the sons of Ganga. But the last son, the eighth Vasu, he somehow survives and he becomes Devavrata. And Devavrata, he was a son of Shantanu. And later on, Shantanu, he falls in love with another woman, Satyavati. But then when Satyavati wanted to marry, Satyavati's father puts a condition that, what's the point of giving my daughter in marriage to you? My grandsons will always have to be, subservient to your elder son, Bhishma, who's such a virtuous person, expert in military arts, the greatest warrior, expert in principles of dharma, right? And also elder born. So my grandchildren will always have to be his assistants, his servants. So what's the point on giving in my daughter? So when Bhishma comes to know of this predicament that his father was put in, Devavrata, he takes his great vow that I will never become the king. Rather, I will always remain subservient to whoever is the king of the throne of Hastinapur. And because he took that great fierce vow, his name became Bhishma, the fierce one. And because many of you are wondering at this point that, oh, if indeed Bhishma is such a great devotee and giving such deep philosophy of dharma, why did he side on the on of adharma on the side of Kauravas? Because he took this vow, right? At an external level, he took a vow to support whoever is the king of Hastinapura. At an internal level, Krishna wanted to also use Bhishma as a pawn to show that even if you are the mighty Bhishma, if you are on the side of adharma, you have to perish. So Prabhupada gives an interesting statement in one of the previous purports that sometimes, a very Indian context statement, that sometimes to teach the new daughter-in-law who came to the house, the mother-in-law uses the daughter to teach, right? So if say something is happening in the house and something is not done right by the daughter-in-law, the mother-in-law will shout at her own daughter, hey, why did you not put this back in place? Right? So she's chastising the daughter with the intention to teach the new daughter-in-law so that she doesn't feel bad about, being corrected. So Prabhupada quotes the example to show that how Krishna uses somebody so dear like Bhishma to show the proper way of conduct for all of us. So he puts his great devotees, his pure devotees in misery so that we can learn lessons from their life. And so Bhishma himself says that these Mahajanas like Shiva, Narada, Kapila, they are the ones who can truly know the Lord's glories. Right? And then he further clarifies that how don't think that this is just your ordinary maternal cousin, but rather this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. Right? And then he says, being the Supreme Lord, actually, he is not partial. He is very, very impartial and neutral. Present as Paramatma within the heart, he is equally reciprocating with everyone. Because at this point, somebody may think, oh, if Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhishma knows it, and Krishna also knows that Bhishma knows it, then why Bhishma got such a raw deal? Why he had to suffer so much? Because we like to see apples and apples together, right? So Pandavas, devotees, and they live happily ever after. Bhishma, devotee, suffering on the battlefield. But look, Bhishma is clarifying to all of us as readers that no, Krishna is always neutral. He is never partial. Then one may still ask, oh, then what about his devotees? Then he says, yet, despite being equal to everyone, he is extra merciful to his devotees. Look what Krishna did. To give me a blessing, he has come now at the last moments of my death, of my life. Right? So look at the level of gratitude that Bhishma has. That he is not expressing any grudge that, oh, look, you are showing favor to Yudhishthir and the Pandavas, but I am even greater. I am one of the Mahajans. I am one of the 12 Mahajans. Right? None of the Pandavas are in the list of Mahajans. So I should be getting greater favor. Right? But look at the level of gratitude that Bhishma has. He's saying that, oh, I know you brought all the Pandavas, but I know, my lord, why you came here. You used Yudhishthir as as an excuse to come and bring him to me so that I can give him some instructions. But actually, you came here to bless me at the time of my death so that I can properly remember you at the time of my death. Right? And then he gives very, very powerful verse that he says that how the Supreme Personality of Godhead who appears in the mind of the devotee by attentive devotion and meditation and by chanting of the holy names releases the devotee from the bondage of fruitive activities at the time of quitting his material body. So the greatest blessing Krishna can give anyone, right, is this thing: attention, meditation, and devotion. At the time of our death, because throughout our life we are struggling for these three things. We are struggling for attention. Our mind is so inattentive. We are struggling to remain focused during meditation, and we are struggling to grasp some level of devotional standard. So all these three things Krishna manifested in Bhishma at the time of his death. That shows how much he favored Bhishma, what the kind of mercy he gave to him, right? And then now, beautiful prayers Bhishma is going to offer. Because we need to understand Bhishma, while different devotees, they exchange a very unique mellow, unique rasa, a mood while reciprocation with the Lord. While Arjuna was in a very Sakyaras, like a friendly terms with Krishna. Some of the other Pandavas, they were more in a servitude, in the mood of a servant. Bhishma had the mood of chivalry with Krishna, because Bhishma himself was a warrior and he saw Krishna also as a fellow warrior. So if you carefully see all the prayers that Bhishma is going to offer, one, you will appreciate his attention to detail, how he was observing Krishna through the battlefield. Two, you will experience this mood of chivalry. So first he says that, may my Lord, who's four-handed and whose beautiful lotus, decorated lotus face, with eyes as red as a rising sun, is smiling, kindly await me at that moment when I quit this material body. So one, because he's in that mood of Vaikuntha, where Krishna has his four-handed Narayan form, he is expressing his prayer to his Ishtadev. Though he knows Krishna is that Narayan, he is requesting, my Lord, please kindly be here to manifest that form. And then this whole section which I spoke about, how Yudhishthir then asks Bhishma about some important instructions about how to conduct life, about about the act of charity, how to organize a society, how to rule. He gives, there's so many questions he asks, and that whole long instructions that Yudhishthir gives, all of that is covered in this section, though Bhagavatam doesn't go into all the details. So all those details, they come in the Mahabharata. So just in 3 verses, Bhagavatam summarizes all of that, right? And then as he was speaking, suddenly Bhishma notices that now the Uttarayana Kala has started, the time when the sun is now in its northern solstice. It is starting to move upwards. And Bhishma, because he took that great vow, he was blessed with the blessing called as Ichha Mrityu, or he could decide the time of his death. No mortal being can kill Bhishma. Bhishma will leave his body whenever he decides. So he was waiting for this very, very auspicious time called as Uttarayana Kala, right? So which is basically after the Sankranti festival, right? So we recently celebrated the summer solstice, right? So that is a point from where, that is the longest day. After that, again, the sun starts to descend down, right? So Dakshinayana starts. So yeah, so this summer solstice time, the Sankranti time, the January 14th. So that's the time when this whole episode took place. Of course, we may go into some technicalities. The date of the solstice also changes with time. So this happened much earlier. It's not on January 14th as we have today, because back then it was it was almost in December back then. Every century it moves ahead like that. So anyway, so Bhishma enters into that particular time. This is the time when the yogis, they decide to quit their body. And so after speaking about all these complicated topics of politics and administration and this and that, can you imagine somebody doing that for so long, and in a flash they are able to withdraw their attention and now move their complete attention towards thinking about the Lord, right? It is not easy to do that. I'm sure we all have been there, done that, where we've been doing something, some activity. Maybe we've been engaged at work all day, some busy, important deadline. You've been thinking about some important presentation you are trying to make and you're running against deadline. You're making the PPT and it took you around 18 hours to finish that PPT non-stop. And then after 18 hours, you are suddenly told, okay, now sit and peacefully chant. You pick up your bead bag, but only the PPT is going on here. I should have changed in slide number 42. I think I should have added this point also. So you leave your beads aside and go back to your PPT. But Yudhishthir didn't have that problem. Bhishma didn't have that problem. As soon as he realized Uttarayana time has come, immediately he stopped speaking and withdrew his mind from everything else and started gazing purely at the Lord. And he could see, others could not see that, but Krishna manifested his dear four-handed form that he requested. Everybody else saw only the two-handed form of Krishna, but Bhishma was able to see that. And then it said that he entered the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, where by pure meditation, he completely withdrew his awareness from everything else. And he entered into a state where he is now ready to quit his body. Right? And beautiful prayers now. He says, let me now invest. So this is the whole art of dying that Bhishma is going to teach. How a person should leave their body. Bhishma Dev said, let me now invest my thinking, feeling and willing, which were so long engaged in different subjects and occupational duties. In all, let me invest all of them in the all-powerful Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. He is always self-satisfied, but sometimes, being the leader of the devotees, he enjoys transcendental pleasure by descending onto the material world, although from him only the material world is created. So he is first glorifying Krishna's supreme position. Can you imagine, even at that last moment of his death, what was the state of consciousness that he had, right? And then he further continues that, look at the memories that he has. They say at the time of death, if any of you have, witnessed any elderly people in your family die, many times they go through memory loss. They're only blabbing some abstract things or, right? But it is said that at the time of death, you cannot cheat anyone. Whatever is inside is going to come out, right? And now we will know what is inside Bhishma's heart. Even though he was in the heart of the whole political drama of Mahabharata, look what is coming out. Sri Krishna is the intimate friend of Arjuna. He had appeared on this earth in his transcendental body, which resembles the bluish color of the tamal tree. Look at the absorption with which he is glorifying Krishna's beautiful form. His body attracts everyone in the three planetary systems. May his glittering yellow dress and his lotus face, covered with paintings of sandalwood pulp, be the object of my attraction, and may I not desire any fruitive results. This is the consciousness that Bhishma has. More. He says, now he's reminiscing all those beautiful memories that he has of Krishna as a warrior in that chivalrous spirit. On the battlefield, that flowing hair of Krishna turned ashen due to the dust raised by the hooves of the horses. Now, when most devotees, when we are remembering Krishna, we are thinking, when we stand before the beautiful form of the Lord, we're thinking, oh, how the pujari decorated the flowers in hair of Krishna, how beautifully the turban was made. Our meditation may be like that. But for somebody in the chivalrous spirit, this is their meditation, where Krishna's hair is decorated not with flowers, but from the dust of the battlefield. And it's not that there is beautiful chandan on his face, but his face is decorated with beads of sweat because he's toiling hard in the battlefield. And this may be a little bewildering for us to understand because we are not in that chivalrous mood. All these decorations are intensified by the wounds dealt by my sharp arrows, which were enjoyed by him. Let my mind go to that Krishna. Because, in the battlefield, Bhishma was throwing very, very powerful astras towards Arjuna, and Krishna was absorbing all of them. And just to act like an ordinary person, Krishna also allowed some blood to come out of his transcendental body. And that excited Bhishma. Can you imagine the sight of blood? Does it excite you? Then you are in the chivalrous spirit, right? So no way we are there. So for him, it's not the beautiful Sham Sundar form of Krishna or that little baby Damodar who's stealing butter. That's not the form of Krishna. For him, Krishna toiling in the battlefield, oozing with blood and perspiration and dust covered all over him. That's the form that Bhishma is meditating upon. Ah. And then he further glorifies in obedience of the command of his friend. Lord Krishna entered into the arena of battlefield of Kurukshetra between the soldiers of Arjuna and Duryodhana. And while there, he shortened the lifespans of the opposite parties by his merciful glance. This was done simply by looking at his enemy. Let my mind be fixed upon Krishna. Because actually, Krishna took a vow that he's never going to pick up a weapon in the battle of Kurukshetra. And so, then how did Krishna participate in the war? Just by his glance, he was orchestrating the result of the war. Bhishma knew that very well, right? So he's glorifying the silent warrior that Krishna was. But was Krishna truly silent in the war? Because you see, like imagine, sometimes just give you a sporting analogy. Imagine your favorite sports star, like say Sachin Tendulkar or somebody from that time, right? Imagine your favorite, you somehow get to know that he's playing in Wankhede and you know that that is his home ground and you buy a ticket to watch Sachin Tendulkar bat. And as soon as you enter the stadium, you get the news that Sachin today decides he's not going to bat. He will only play the role of a water boy. He decides to become the 12th man in the game today, right? And all you are doing, standing there in the spectator, right, is watching Sachin run back and forth holding water bottles. How will you feel? You will say, Sachin, at least once pick up the bat. At least for one ball, please pick up the bat and hit one shot, right? You are praying for that. So Bhishma was in that mood. He was hoping Krishna as a warrior is going to fight, but he decides to become something even worse than the water boy. He decides to become a slave, a chariot driver. So Bhishma was thinking, my God, what should I do to see Krishna in the way I love to see him? So Bhishma orchestrates a very beautiful, because sometimes the Lord, being Bhaktavatsal, he becomes subservient to the will of his devotee. So at one point in the war, it so happened that the Pandavas were attacking left, right, and center. Arjuna and Bhima were literally going on a rampage. And Duryodhan that evening, he becomes so upset. He comes to Bhishma's tent and starts complaining, Bhishma, I think you are showing partiality to your favorite grandchildren. You're not interested in fighting for us. When a kshatriya, when a warrior's conduct and morality is questioned, that is worse than death. So Bhishma immediately says, oh, you want me to end the war? Here. He immediately picks up 5 arrows from skewer and he says, these 5 arrows are going to go through the chest of every Pandava tomorrow morning. And when a warrior makes a vow, it's something, it's not some political promise that people make, but rather it's so Duryodhan was very happy. He says, okay, give me those 5 arrows. I'm going to keep it under my protection. So meanwhile, Krishna, as Antaryami, as Paramatma, he gets to know about this. He's extremely worried. He's racing back and forth in the Pandavas camp. And Arjuna is wondering, Krishna, what happened to you? He says, get up. You are sleeping peacefully. I'm having, sleepless nights here. Do you know what happened? Bhishma took a vow and he empowered these 5 arrows that he's going to pierce all your chest tomorrow with this. We have to go and act. So Krishna takes Arjuna to Duryodhan's camp. And Duryodhan, the haughty, egoistic king that he was, he looks at Arjuna and says, oh, Arjuna, why you came here in the dead of the night? Do you want to surrender? Please, if you want to surrender, please tell me. I'll immediately end the war. Right? I will issue a ceasefire. Right? If you're understanding the current scenario. Right? So Duryodhan was reflecting that. And whatever you want, you beg for whatever you want, I will give you. Right? So Arjuna says, no, we are not interested in ceasefire. Just give us those 5 arrows that Bhishma gave you. And immediately Duryodhan was bewildered. How did he know about those 5 arrows? But once he made a promise out of his ego, he had to succumb. So he gave those arrows to Arjuna, and Krishna and Arjuna took those arrows and they destroyed those. Next day morning, Bhishma, he was putting on his armor and called Duryodhan, give me my 5 arrows. Duryodhan says, actually this has happened last night. Arjuna came and he took them. And Bhishma becomes furious. You made me break. Of course, he didn't blame Duryodhan. He understood Krishna is the cause of all this. He made me break my warrior vow. I'm going to make Krishna break his vow. And that day, Bhishma was like raging wind, attacking from all. It looked like he's going to end the war today. And finally, the Pandavas were desperate. They sent Arjuna. Only Arjuna, you can counter Bhishma. And even Arjuna couldn't handle the onslaught that Bhishma was, showering on the Pandavas and Arjuna. At one point, Krishna becomes so upset. He says, "How dare you, put my devotee under such distress?" Krishna leaves the reins, jumps off the chariot, picks up a wheel of a broken cart, and comes towards Bhishma to attack. And immediately, and this is such a powerful scene, there's a beautiful painting also of this scene. You will see Krishna is rushing towards Bhishma, and Bhishma drops his arrow, joins his palms, and says, Krishna, please kill me. There is nothing greater fortune I can ever wish for as a warrior to be killed by you. And Arjuna is trying to pull Krishna back. He's literally dragging, holding on to Krishna's leg and trying to pull him back. But no, Krishna was so strong, he was rushing towards Bhishma, dragging Arjuna along with him. And this scene is such a powerful scene. It may seem like Krishna is angry, but Krishna is simultaneously reciprocating with both his devotees, Bhishma and Arjuna. And this was, you can say, this is like the grand crescendo in the life of Bhishma, where he got a very, very personal reciprocation from Krishna. It's like that one rare moment where he had that very, very unique reciprocation with Krishna. And that moment comes to his mind, right? So he says that how he talks about this scene, that fulfilling my desire and sacrificing his own promise, he got down from the chariot, took up its wheel, and ran towards me hurriedly, just like a lion goes to kill an elephant. He even dropped his outer garment on the way. Can you imagine your enemy is coming to kill you? Will you start observing the details? Did he put his left foot forward or right foot forward? Right? Did which button of his is tied and which is not in place? Will you observe all the beautiful details about your enemy? So clearly, it was not an inimical interaction that they had. It was a beautiful rasa of chivalry that was being exchanged, right? And then, may he, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, who awards salvation, right? Mukunda, may he be my ultimate destination. Bhagavan Gatir Mukunda. On the battlefield, he charged me as if angry because the wounds dealt by my sharp arrows. His shield was scattered and his body was smeared with blood due to the wounds, right? And then he says, at that moment of death, let my ultimate attraction be to Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead. I concentrate my mind upon the chariot driver of Arjuna, who stood with a whip in his right hand and a bridle rope in his left, who was very careful to give protection to Arjuna's chariot by all means. Those who saw him on the battlefield of Kurukshetra attained their original forms after death. They attained their swarupa, their spiritual state. So the speciality of Krishna, the entire battle of Kurukshetra, is everybody who died in the battlefield, they got liberated. This is what is a speciality. Many times people say, oh, why Krishna orchestrated this war, blah, blah, blah. He created so much of, calamity. But no, only a person who has the capacity to liberate others has the right to instigate a war. So Krishna, being that Supreme Bhagavan, he knew he's going to liberate everybody in the battlefield, and therefore he orchestrated this war. And that scene was coming in Bhishma's head, right? And so he says, but to get favor from the Lord, the most easiest and the most effective way is to pray to the Lord's devotees. And who greater devotees than the gopis of Vrindavan? Even though he was in the chivalrous mood, he wanted to desperately seek the Lord's mercy. Therefore, he invokes the names of Krishna's greatest devotees. Let my mind be fixed upon Lord Krishna, whose motions and smiles of love attracted the damsels of Brajdham. These gopis imitated the characteristic movements of the Lord during the whole Rasa Leela, right? And so he remembers the whole Rajasuya Yagya pastime, how Krishna got the first worship there, and Bhishma was secretly so happy that Krishna got that first worship. May I remember that particular moment, and may I remember the Lord that way, right? And he says, now I can meditate upon with full concentration upon that one Lord. Now, because he's present before me, and now I have transcended the misconceptions of duality in regards to his presence in everyone's heart, even the heart of the mental speculators. He is in everyone's heart. The sun may be perceived differently, but the sun is one. If you go to different parts of the world, some places the sun is rising, some places the sun is already on the sky, some places the sun may be covered by clouds, right? Some places the sun has already set, some places, so you'll see, even though the same sun is visible differently, perceived differently, but the sun never changes. This beautiful analogy is always quoted to show how different people, based on their consciousness, perceive the absolute truth differently. So he clarifies this, and then saying so, his breath stopped, and the great warrior Bhishma, who was feared even by the great devatas, he fell. And eventually it is said that he entered into that spiritual state. He entered into Vaikuntha Dham, where our acharyas explain there is a special Vaikuntha Loka where Lord Krishna is present as Lord Parthasarathi, as the chariot driver of Arjuna. So Krishna is in that mood. So into that Vaikuntha Dham, where he can get that chivalrous reciprocation, right? Bhishma, he left his body in such a glorious way. So if you see Bhishma's entire life, even though he was a Mahajan, he is the one person who was thoroughly misunderstood. Okay? Because he was on the enemy's side, because so many situations happened where he could have stopped certain things, but he did not, apparently did not. But the proof of his greatness comes in this final episode of his death. Because you can fake so many things while you're alive, but you cannot cheat at the time of death. His real inner consciousness comes out in this episode, in this beautiful section, right? And this episode of Bhishma leaving his body and his consciousness at the time of death is such a powerful and relevant one, especially for devotees in ISKCON. Srila Prabhupada, at the time of his death, he showed that same level of spiritual acumen. Even till his last few moments, he was translating the Srimad Bhagavatam. Because somebody may wonder, oh, is it because the cameras were rolling, he was, speaking into the mic something? No, it was not a publicity stunt. Because for him, it was the instruction given to him by his spiritual master to translate these books and publish these books. So even till last ounce of prana that he had in his body, he was doing that, right? And the clarity of mind that he had, if you read those purports of the 10th canto, 14th chapter, the last chapter that Prabhupada translated, such deep clarity, and that shows his state of consciousness. So this should be our aspiration, because many times we are so worried about Krishna, make my life peaceful, Krishna, make my life blissful, happy, da da da. We are always praying to the Lord about making our life, which is good. But actually, a smart devotee will make this prayer that Krishna, teach me this art of dying. Right? More important than the art of living is the art of dying. because life is just a preparation, but death is that ultimate examination. So our real inner metal is tested at the time of death. So it's not a pessimistic thought, but rather it should be a more sobering thought as to how we get so easily disturbed with tiny tribulations in our life and miss out on going deep in our life. So this episode of Bhishma should be a perfect example to show us that how ultimately all those problems that we are so overwhelmed with in our life are just a small flash in the pan, and they're all happening by the will of the time factor, right? And we just need to learn from that and move on and not get obsessed about these things and get stuck with them in your inner space, right? And that shows what how we will pass the exam of death. All right, so these are a few thoughts which I wanted to share. If anybody wants to add something, any quick questions or comments, please feel free to uh, drop it in the chat box, or if you want to unmute yourself. We have perhaps time just for one question because we are already over time. If somebody wants to ask, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Medina here. Thank
Yes,
you so
yes.
much for your class.
Uh,
Really missed it.
yes.
I'll be very quick. I always loved the scene in Mahabharata where, not loved, I mean, as a woman, I always had this question that why Bhishma did not come to, rebel or protect whilst Draupadi was, insulted in that court.
Mhm.
And as much as I mean, I love his, personality and he's a saint. Um, but I always had this question that how come out of everybody? I can forgive everyone, but why him? For me he's like that father figure, whom I almost like I cannot accept that he could keep silent. And
Mm,
then you gave this analogy about the mother-in-law giving the example on the daughter.
mm.
Is this also the similar situation where Krishna wanted to show to us that, through his example somehow, I don't know, like, can you help me make sense out of this?
See, actually, we should understand many times our understanding of this particular episode may be from the way Mahabharata has been told to us in perhaps in pop culture, in movies or TV series, etc. If you actually read
Mm-hmm.
that section of Mahabharata, it is not that Bhishma never warned Dhritarashtra.
Mm-hmm.
Time and again, both Vidura and Bhishma warned that how
Mm-hmm.
Duryodhana, his psychology, just by seeing his nature, they predicted that this person is going to destroy the entire dynasty. You are literally
Mm-hmm.
giving milk to a poisonous snake, which is going to bite us back someday, right?
Mm, mm,
Having given those warnings, see, Bhishma also had to maintain the royal conduct, where in public he could not have spoken certain things because in that assembly there were so many other people. Certain
mm,
conversations which are supposed certain admonishing certain corrections which are to be made in private cannot be made in public. So actually, if you see after that episode, again Bhishma admonishes Dhritarashtra, look what you have done. You literally ended the prestige of the Kuru dynasty. And unfortunately, Bhishma,
mm-hmm,
of course, it is not that we are trying to justify Bhishma because even he had to fall. So that example that you
mm-hmm,
mentioned about the daughter and the
mm-hmm,
daughter-in-law. So yes, Bhishma also was responsible in one way for the situation, and so he got because he sided the injustice. So he did
mm-hmm,
get the due result, also indicating that even though you may be dharma personified, but if you do that one little adharma, right, you
mm-hmm,
will have to be punished and you will have to go through. But at the same time, we need to understand that Bhishma was a great Mahajan. He knew when to speak, when not to speak, and somehow, because of his loyalty and the vow to the throne of Hastinapura, his mouth
mm-hmm.
got stuck and he could not have intervened. In fact, Draupadi personally goes to ask Bhishma about this
Yeah.
principle of dharma. And
Mm-hmm.
he just says, dharma is very complicated to to interpret in this situation, and he just kind of bypasses the question that Draupadi asks, because
Yes.
even though he knew it was wrong, he could not verbalize that. So that is what this is also a very powerful lesson, that sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
even though you know what is right, if you are in the company
Mm-hmm.
of wrong, you cannot speak the right.
So is this what Krishna is trying to show to us through this particular?
Exactly, exactly. The
Mm-hmm.
episode is showing that beware of the company that you keep, and the company that you owe your loyalty to end up.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, whether it be your corporate loyalty or your political loyalty. Have so many levels of loyalty that are binding us today, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
choose the wrong masters to be loyal to,
Mm.
you will end up being on the side of adharma, even though you are master
You
of.
are a dharmic person.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Mm,
Okay. Okay. Got it. Got it.
right.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
So, thank you. Okay, we'll end the discussion here. Thank you all so much, and we'll resume next week with another very, very exciting chapter. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.